didn't.
We've been in suspension for minutes, and it's now being 2:03. I'm calling this meeting to order or resume the town meeting of Cinco de Mayo of 2018. Hang on for 1 second, Mr. Chair. A couple things. Number one, we really want registered voters to be in these two blocks, not on the wings. So if you're a registered voter, please, Nancy, make sure you're here. If you already checked in, if you're a registered voter who has already checked in, we are going to count you off. You're going to do a little count off like we did in school to make sure that we know how many people are here who are registered voters. Is there anybody who has not checked in who's a registered voter?
In the morning.
Yes, I'll be clear. Does anybody check in the morning? Then please do check in now. Okay, just to know how many people are back who are registered voters who have already checked in, to avoid us having to take the time to check you in again, we're going to do a count off, and we're going to start right here with number 1.
2, 3.
Let's do it this way.
4,
5,
6,
7, 8, 9,
10,
11,
12,
13, 14,
15, 16,
17,
18,
20,
21,
22,
23,
24,
25,
26,
And
27, 28,
29, 30,
31,
32, 33,
35, 36, 37, 38,
40, 44, 45, 46, 47,
49,
49, 50. Did you just count 51, 52, you've already checked in. 53. Oh, 54. Oh, you got it. 53. Anybody else come in? 53. Already checked in registered voters. Registered voters are going to sit in these two blocks. So I get ready for spot. So, Article 23.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes, Mr. Valena.
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $2,000 to fund the other post-employment benefits liability trust fund account.
Is there a second?
second.
Okay, talk to us.
So this is an account that we're building at a glacial pace to cover post-employment benefits, the liability for growing retirement benefits. That this is a statewide issue. Hopefully you've read about this. There's millions of dollars statewide in liability, perhaps $1 billion. That is currently unfunded. The state wants all municipalities to be putting money aside. It's not enough that has any crackable solution that we can see, not just us, but anyone. But we're doing something. We're putting $2,000 aside. So there it is.
Okay, this has been recommended by the Finance Committee 4-0 unanimously and required a simple majority to pass. Discussion. We ready to vote on other post-employment benefits of $2,000 by raise and appropriate? Ready to vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously, and the number is 59. I'll keep track as they come in. Article 24, do I hear a motion?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, Nancy Hoffman, Spruce Corner Road. To see if the town will vote to appropriate $162,786 to pay for fiscal year 2019 sewer expenses.
Okay, you moved that the town do something.
I move.
Moved that the town do something. And is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
amazing to me that we have kept the expenses as compact and concise and in line as possible. We worked for a couple of years to get our superintendent's salary up, and we're glad that this year the town did this town-wide thing. So we are now finally in line with where we think our superintendent should be. So that is some of our increase to get that salary up. Other than that, our other biggest expenses, electrical, fuel, and disposing of the sludge.
Thank you. This has been recommended by our Finance Committee 4-0, unanimous recommendation, and requires a simple majority. Discussion, please. Ms. Lee.
Mary Link, Buckland Road. Like with the transfer station, can you tell us what the income from the sewer is also?
This is pretty much a self-funding program. The people who flush pay for it. That's how it works.
I know there's a joke in here, but I'm not even going to. You did it. Further discussion. Did that answer your question? Yes. Further discussion? Ready to vote? Okay. All those in favor of appropriating $162,786 to pay for sewer expenses for this coming fiscal year, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Article 25, revolving funds.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Kohler.
I move that the town vote and to approve the following spending limits for the revolving funds noted below pursuant to the Ashfield Revolving Fund bylaw and pursuant to the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Sections 53E and a half. Second.
Seconded. Please.
So last year we voted for this bylaw, and one of the requirements of this bylaw is that approval limits must be annually voted by town meeting. And the three that I see before me are the dog license and control of $5,000, park $1,500, and the library $2,500.
Thank you. This has been recommended by our Finance Committee 4-0 and requires a simple majority. Discussion on our revolving funds. Ready to vote? All those in favor of approving those spending limits for our revolving funds say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Article 26.
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Carter.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to accept the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 22F, which allows any municipal board or officer empowered to issue a license, permit, certificate, or to render a service or perform work to fix reasonable fees for all such licenses, permits, or certificates, or may fix reasonable charges to be paid for any services rendered or work performed by the city or town or any department thereof. Seems like a lot to me.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, will you explain for us what's going on here?
Yeah, this is a local option law in the MGL, the Massachusetts General Law. It's local option acceptance would allow elected and appointed boards or committees to set permit fees, and elected boards set their own fees. Appointed boards need approval of the appointing authority, which would be the select board. But this is to try to regain fees and expenses for extra work that would go into issuing licenses.
Thank you. This has been recommended by our Finance Committee 4-0. Unanimous recommendation and requires a simple majority. Discussion. Yes.
I believe the notes say that the officer, if not elected, his fees and...
I'm sorry, sir. I'm going to bring you a microphone and you're going to start with your name and address.
Robert Churdan, 1180 Holy Road. And the question I have is, in your verbal presentation, it said that appointed officials had to get approval from the elected board that was responsible for the appointment. It doesn't say that in this paragraph. Can you just clarify that that is indeed the case?
Yeah, that's typically the select board.
I'm sorry.
That's correct, and that's typically the select board that would do the appointing.
Thank you.
Good question, thank you. Further discussion? I'm going to reiterate, we want all registered voters to sit in one of these two blocks. It makes it easier. We know we're going to have to count in the future, so that's what we need. Any further discussion? We ready to vote? All those in favor of setting permit fees at local option, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Taylor, have you folks, they're just coming or have they previously checked in?
Just coming.
Thank you. And how about this vote? Were you here to do it? Okay. I'm sorry, for those who don't understand, I'm keeping count of how many people have already checked in so we know when we take a vote or it needs a supermajority, how many voters, without requiring you to check in all over. Okay, Article 27.
Moderator.
Yeah.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
I move that the town vote to accept the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 21D, otherwise known as non-criminal disposition, which provides for non-criminal disposition of any violations of any ordinance or bylaw or any rule or regulation of any municipal officer, board, or department, the violation of which is subject to a specific penalty.
Is there a second? Second. Who seconded? Okay. Please.
So this particular general law, acceptance of this statute for the town would allow the town to enforce collection of fines for violations of local bylaws or statutory infractions without going through a criminal proceeding. So instead of having to bring someone to court to collect a fine, you'd be able to do it. A non-criminal disposition procedure allows for an enforcement officer to write a ticket for an infraction like a parking ticket, for example, for a specific sum of money to be collected as a penalty instead of having to go to court.
This has been recommended by our Finance Committee as well, 4-0, and also requires a simple majority for passage. Discussion. We're ready to vote? All those in favor of Article 27, local option for non-criminal dispositions as read, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. No. Any abstentions? It passes by majority.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, Mr. Carter.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town pass over Article 28.
Okay, I will treat this as a motion to table, which means indefinite. That means, is there a second to the motion to table? Second. Second by the chair. This is non-amendable, non-debatable. We have to vote it, and then we'll give a very brief explanation of why the motion was made. Why don't you give a very brief explanation?
We're not ready.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion to table, which means we're putting it off indefinitely, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? We don't have to count. Passes by 2/3 majority in unanimity. Article 30. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Moderator.
Yes, Mr. Carter.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to charge a fee of $10 to be added to and collected as part of the tax for each written demand issued by the collector, as authorized by the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 60, Section 15, effective as of July 1st, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Coleman. Please.
Yeah, the current demand fee is now $5. The law would allow us to charge as high as $15, I believe. But the fee increase to $10 will help offset printing, processing costs, postage, envelopes, and and it should encourage taxpayers to pay in a more timely manner. The demand fees have been $5 since way before I was ever involved in paying taxes, and that was a while ago.
Thank you. This has been recommended by the Finance Committee unanimously, 4-0 to 0, and this requires a simple majority to pass. Any discussion about increasing the demand fee to $10 from $5 effective July 1st of this year? Discussion? Ready to vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And it passes unanimously. Article 31, is there a motion?
Moderator,
Mr. Lanning.
I move that the town vote to accept the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 64N, Section 3, or any other enabling authority to impose a local sales tax upon the sale or transfer of marijuana or marijuana products for adult use by a marijuana establishment at the rate of 3% of the total sales price received by the marijuana retailer as consideration for the sale of marijuana or marijuana products, or any higher rate as authorized by law.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Coleman. Thank you. Talk to us.
Sure.
Rap to us.
Acceptance of the statutory allowance charge of 3% for all retail marijuana or marijuana products would offset some of the administrative and potential public safety costs that we might incur with new marijuana regulations that the state has come out with. Establishment of this tax has to be in place prior to retail sales occurring. To date, the town has not been notified of any interest in retail sales within town, but again, this has to be in place before that happens.
Thank you. This has been recommended by the Finance Committee by 4-0 to 0, and also will require a simple majority vote. So, discussion. 3% sales tax. When is it? Yes, sir, Mr.
Just one
Markey.
quick question. Who gets the 3%? The town?
Your name is Robert Markey.
Oh, I'm sorry, Robert Markey, Dallas Road.
And Robert Markey, for the record here, the amplification, has asked who gets the 3%?
Yes, the town.
Other discussion? Question. I'm going to carry this to you, and you're going to tell us who you are for the record.
John O'Connor, Plainfield Road. Does this implies it's going to change without authorization from 3% to this higher rate?
I don't understand the question.
Neither do I.
It says you can charge 3% or any higher rate. It's authorized by law. So does this automatically change to the higher rate, or do we have to pass that?
Well, 3% is the maximum that the state allows right now.
Yeah, but it says
We don't know.
We don't know. If the state raises it to higher, does it automatically go to the higher rate?
The
3% is not
Okay, the question, thank you, it's a good question. It says,
board could.
go ahead.
The select board could. If the rate went up, if the state allowed the rate to go higher than 3%, the enabling authority, which is the select board, could follow that to whatever. Sure, it could.
Good question.
We don't know.
Point of
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, would you read the question, read the sentence and make a...
Yes, Mr. Marquez asked if we could have clarification of the question. So it says, is it authorizing by a marijuana establishment at the rate of 3% of the total sales price received by the marijuana retailer as a consideration for the sale of marijuana or marijuana products, comma, or at any higher rate as authorized by law. So the question was, is it capping it at 3%, or if it's authorized by law, does it automatically go higher? And the answer was, the authority is vested in the select board to set that rate. So this gives permission to the select board to raise it if the state law allows in excess of 3%, which right now it doesn't, right?
Right, Mr. Moderator, we could set it at a lower rate too. It could be lower than 3.
Right. So the statute will determine what they can do, and this is authorizing them to do what the statute allows. That's the answer to a very good question. Yes, Mr. Elwell.
Will Elwell, Baptist Corner Road. I'm a little confused of why we are spearheading this particular product, marijuana, as opposed to the sale of bales of hay. Why is this being focused upon? I don't understand. The other thing that is curious is, do we have a definition of a marijuana establishment? What is that?
Thank you.
I'll try.
Please do.
Well, we're dealing with it because of the ballot initiative question, I don't know how many, like 1 or 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, that the citizens of the state passed allowing for the use of marijuana, legal use of marijuana in the state. There was a Cannabis Control Commission that came out with regulations, and that kind of establishes what can be done and how it's to be sold. And this is part of that legislation. It's our reaction to the fact that marijuana is now legal to be sold in the state. What kind of establishments? Like the colloquial term is pot cafes is some sort of an establishment where people can go and partake. I don't know beyond that, to be honest. I don't know.
So if in fact,
retail sales to the public.
if in fact we decide to allow those retail sales, this allows us to tax it according to what the statute says.
So that excludes a person just selling it off his own property?
You mean illegal sale?
Yes.
Yeah, we really couldn't keep track of that. I don't think we're keeping track of that right now.
Well, it all just sounds very nebulous to me, and I don't get it.
If you know something, let us know. We might be able to collect 3% on it.
No, I think the illegal ones are tax-free. Further discussion? Yes, sir. Mr. Gray.
Clarification, background
What's
question.
your name?
Oh, Lyle Gray, Apple Valley Road. Do we have a similar tax on alcohol sales in this town?
No.
Further discussion? If somebody wishes to speak, come up to one of these 2 microphones and that'll save us time, and I'll see you on deck. Okay?
Peter Curtis, Murray Road. So just for clarification, this would only be for marijuana sales within the town of Ashfield by an establishment that was legal in the town of Ashfield.
Correct.
So if they had a dispensary in Greenfield, then no tax would go to the town of Ashfield.
Correct. It would go to Greenfield if they impose such a tax.
Okay. Thank you.
Further discussion? We ready to vote? Okay, we are on Article 31, And this would allow us, voting yes would mean that we are allowed to impose what is right now up to 3% for any, for tax on any retail sales of marijuana within our town that are legal to sell, that have been authorized to sell. So all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. And how many abstentions? 1, 2. So what I'm going to do is we're going to have you raise your hands. All in favor of this, please raise your hand. I'm just going to see if I can get a sense of the room. Okay, lower your... All opposed, please raise your hands. I think those in favor exceed those opposed. Does anybody disagree and want to count? Okay, so it carries by a simple majority. Okay, Article 32, zoning bylaw for large-scale industrial and commercial facilities. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Kohler.
I move that the town vote to amend the Town of Ashfield zoning bylaws by adding a section, zoning bylaw for large-scale industrial and commercial facilities as provided in the posted warrant.
That's moved and seconded. We're going to do something a little bit unusual here, but it's because I met with the town council for an hour and a half. And I'll give you the explanation, and later on we'll see how it unfolds. There are, I think, 14 sections in this proposed amendment to our zoning bylaws. One of them, town council has learned from what happened in other towns, will not be approved by the Attorney General. It's an unlawful section. So town council has reworked that section for us into what's lawful. So I have advised Mr. Kohler and the board that what I'm going to do is allow a motion to amend, before we entertain this article, to amend it so we know it's in compliance with what town council says is legal, rather than passing it as posted with an unlawful section. So do you have a motion?
I do, Mr. Moderator. I move to amend the existing Section 8 of the Large-Scale Industrial and Commercial Facilities Bylaw presented to the May 5th, 2018 Ashfield Town Meeting by deleting it and replacing it with Section 8 as provided in a handout distributed at this meeting. Additions and deletions to the original Section 8 are shown.
Is there a second to that motion to amend? So that's the second. Would that be Mr. Leonard? Yes, seconded by Mr. Leonard. So, we need to add anything else to what I said with respect to the amendment. We are now just discussing whether to accept the amended Section 8 before we go to the main motion.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
I seek permission to invite Ms. Peggy Sloan, Director of the Planning at Franklin County Regional Council of Governments, to join me as an expert and co-presenter assisting our select.
Okay. Clearly, Ms. Sloan is a resident of Ashfield, a longtime voter of Ashfield. She does not need our permission for her to vote to discuss this, but she is acting in the capacity as Director of Planning and Development for the Franklin County Regional Council of Government. But before we do that, Mr. Kohler, before we go here, I want to deal with whether or not to amend what's before us. I just want to discuss whether or not we accept the amendment to Section 8, so that at least we know something that's been deemed lawful is what's before us by town council. So, is there any, does the Finance Committee have a recommendation with respect to the amendment? Mr. Murray? Everybody understand? We're just talking about whether to amend Section 8 by the handout that you've received. There is a handout. They have the new Section 8, what was handed out here. Separate Section 8 on the table. Could somebody please bring those Section 8 handouts and just hand them out to the end of the road? Thank you, Mr. Ronan. Who needs what? Anybody here? Anybody here? Okay, so while we're handing out the handouts, I will tell you that the select board recommends unanimously that you adopt the motion to amend. We'll get to the main motion. Let's get a little right. Is there a recommendation from the Finance Committee on the motion to amend by replacing the language of Section 8 with what's in the handout?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends in favor of the amendment by a vote of 3-4, 3 in favor, 0 against, and 1 abstention.
Thank you. And the select board is 3-0 recommending this amendment. Discussion on the amendment.
Right. This amendment is intended to provide proper procedures required by the Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53G, to allow the planning board to hire outside consultants at the applicant's expense. Without a standard procedure for hiring outside consultants, Town Council recommends that this language be included in this zoning bylaw.
So, just so everyone understands the sequence, this was posted before those recommendations by Town Council were formalized. And it was basically what the Attorney General responded to with respect to other towns with language that looks like what we posted. So we are amending what was posted to comport with what Town Council says we have to do. That's what we're doing. Any further discussion on the motion to amend? Ready to vote on the motion to amend? All those in favor of the amendment that's been proposed, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? 1 abstention. 2 abstentions, and it carries unanimously. Thank you. So now, Ms. Sloan, Director of Planning and Development, has a short presentation. Mr. Kohler is going to help with her. Mr. Kohler is doing it. Right?
Right. We're going to do it together.
Thanks, everybody, for coming back from lunch. I know it's hard to do on such a gorgeous day. So we're going to try to keep this to 15 minutes and get through this thing. Can we go to the other first slide, if that's possible? So, we heard you loud and clear. In 2014, I have a copy of it if anyone wants to look at it. It was a citizen's petition. At that time, this is a time scale, and Ned was looming darkly over this town. And the citizens gained momentum and said, you guys need to do something, or you folks need to do something. They were talking to our leadership at the time. And there's 2 or 3 pages of this citizen's petition, and there are a lot of whereases and therefores, but there is one resolution, and it's in caps. And I put it at the top of this, and it says, therefore, be it resolved that we call upon our leaders to adopt rules, bylaws, or take such other actions as necessary. That was June 23rd, 2014, nearly 4 years ago. This board has been very active we have heard you, and we've been very active. Everything in the somewhat tanned color are things that this board has been doing. We've been involved with everything from motions. We filed on the town's behalf motions to intervene with FERC. We've reached out to a number of political representatives, DeLeo, Rosenberg, relative to the pipeline tax. That was a big issue. We've reached out to the governor and to Richard Neal separately. All of these were separate meetings, separate discussion points, and the 3 select board members signed up. So we've been very, very active. This bylaw that is being presented to you today by the select board, we are empowered to do that. Citizens can recommend a bylaw. Select board, in its capacity, can create bylaws. And the planning board, and I'm talking zoning bylaws, the planning board can do that also. What happened was in year number 4, most recently, if you hit the next slide, I'm sorry, go forward one more time. If you can't go back, Peggy, I apologize. Go back. That bullet there that says work group sessions 1 through 6 culminated in the last quarter of last year, now advanced. And that single bullet is really 6 work sessions. What we did was, we thought it would be best in the air of cooperation, was to invite the other boards. We have a number of boards in the town that are elected boards to participate in the process. We thought that the ownership in such a manner would give us the most wholesome bylaw. So we reached out to all the boards. And the planning board put forth 2 members, and we had some participation from the zoning board of appeals also in these work sessions. We had 6 work sessions, they're dated right there, in the last quarter of last year. And we had a select board information session, and we referred it to the planning board. So this has been a very transparent and deliberate process that has taken considerable effort. All the recommendations were incorporated from the various boards that participated in the work group, and we put it forth. Now, we're very lucky because I failed to give due recognition to Peggy Sloan here, who is a resident in Ashfield, and is also the planning director of FERCOG, the Franklin County Regional Council of Governments. She's the planning director. She's real smart on planning, and she assisted us in this whole process. And town council, who was their council also, was paid for through FERCOG. So this bylaw that is before you today was substantially carried by FERCOG, and a special thanks to them and to you for that effort. So we are here today to consider this bylaw. If you could go to the next slide, I'd appreciate it. This is an example, just an example, but it's similar to every other certificate I've looked at. FERC governs a whole bunch of things. They govern transmission lines, oil pipelines, gas pipelines, hydropower facilities. And this is the certificate of, as you can see right on the top, this is a FERC certificate for the Connecticut Expansion Project down in Sandusfield. And it says, it's like 60 pages, so I've kind of abbreviated it, and I think somewhere around page 40, it says on the bottom there, 85, the Commission encourages applicants to cooperate with state and local agencies regarding the location of pipeline facilities, environmental mitigation measures, and construction procedures. That a state or local authority requires something more different than the Commission does not necessarily make it unreasonable for an applicant, who is a developer, of course, to comply with both the Commission's and the state or local agency's requirements. This bylaw, as hefty as it is, basically states it's a very big net with very big holes to give a higher consideration of due diligence to our town. Okay, it's not a prescription to come in and develop in our town. It says if you're going to come in our town, we expect you to do more than the average small-time developer. And so it's a law that we think, a bylaw that we think protects the town and the assets of the town from very large-scale development projects. So, Peggy, without further ado, I'm going to have you go through the rest of it.
The reason why the Franklin Regional Council of Governments got involved in this is that we've been working with several towns on large-scale bylaws like this. Shelburne actually adopted one. There were a number of comments from the AG's office about that bylaw, which we incorporated and had town council review those changes to try and address some of their comments. We're also working with the town of Conway, who's going to have this before their town meeting next week. So just by way of introduction of what this actually addresses, These are really large projects that require a mandatory environmental impact report. And that is under the state laws, Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA. And so these are projects, just for example, that alter 50 or more acres, or create 10 or more acres of impervious surface. So these are really large projects. There are 2 projects in Franklin County that triggered this mandatory NEPA threshold for the NED pipeline, which Ron talked about, and the big box retailer in Greenfield. So this isn't going to apply to a residential subdivision necessarily, or any of the other projects that might come before the town. These are things that are triggering the NEPA regulations. It doesn't apply to telecommunication projects because the town already has a telecommunication bylaw, so there's a specific carve out for that. It wouldn't address local road or other municipal projects, specifically stating that in the bylaw. And it doesn't address agricultural plans or forest cutting plans that have also been, that are in accordance with state law. So all of those things are exempt from this bylaw. So what it does is it really tries to address the impact from these large-scale projects. And it's designed to protect environmental resources, and it's also designed to protect public health and safety. So the project proponents, if they came to town, they would be required to apply for a special permit with the planning board. So this bylaw is intended to complement your existing zoning bylaw regulations and to add to them, as Ron said, to provide some additional protection that you wouldn't necessarily have with smaller scale development or perhaps need. The special permit granting authority in your community is the planning board. They assess an application, they evaluate the impacts, and they decide whether or not this can be in line with the zoning bylaws of the town. So planning boards can approve a special permit, they can approve it with conditions, or they can deny a special permit. Very important point. They have that discretionary ability to deny it. If they do want to approve it, it requires a supermajority vote, 4 out of 5 members. So this would apply to any new large-scale industrial or commercial scale. Once again, it's meeting that mandatory MEPA threshold, or an expansion that would also trigger MEPA. So it is a very long bylaw. It addresses a lot of different aspects. It looks at water and air quality, it looks at noise and odor, it looks at the impacts on municipal services and infrastructure, such as roads. There's lots of concern during the pipeline discussion about the potential impacts to roads. It addresses public water supplies. It looks at stormwater and flooding, your wetlands, water bodies, and wildlife habitat, and also public health. It would allow the town to hire professional consultants, because most volunteer boards might not have expertise in all these different areas, and so they can do that under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53G. The amendment was designed to be in compliance with that law. Towns usually have a general section of their zoning bylaws that allows towns to hire consultants, or they can have those in the rules and regs. Since that hasn't been included yet, Town Council recommended embedding that within this particular zoning bylaw. But of course, the planning board could also adopt their own section in their rules and regs. This bylaw requires baseline testing and monitoring of water, noise, and air, both before and after construction. And it also requires a financial surety to cover any damage to public property. So if a road was damaged, this would provide some funding to hopefully repair that road. And if it's approved by town meeting, then it gets added to the existing zoning bylaws. So some of the key provisions: there are community and environmental impact assessments requirement. There's road use and construction site access that's considered. There's, as I mentioned, water, noise, and air testing and monitoring, both before any construction occurs and then during the operation of that large-scale facility. It requires studies on traffic, water withdrawal, hazardous materials, and stormwater. A lot of research went into this, looking at impacts particularly with respect to pipelines, what kind of hazardous materials are included in the operation of those facilities and how to address those. It also has removal and restoration requirements. So after a project is no longer being used, what are the provisions for bringing the property back to a better situation, such as removing facilities. There's a financial surety, which I mentioned, to cover public property, and there's also different design requirements that address height, setbacks, screening, lighting, odor, noise, hours of operation, and shadow and flicker was also included in case there was a large-scale event. So these are the steps to adopt. I'm not going to go through them all, but as Ron mentioned, this was referred to the planning board in January. They conducted their public hearing that's required according to the state law, the Zoning Act. And now it's being brought to town meeting for a vote. This is one of those votes that requires a 2/3 vote at town meeting to be adopted. Once it is, then it has to go to the AG's office where they review it. And that's it.
So just to wrap up this conversation, and then it's going to go to back to the moderator. Otis, which is the one we just saw the certificate. If you go down there, they've recently put a pipeline in, and Cold Spring Road is a mess. Potholes everywhere. For a town that has issues with bridges and roads and stuff like that, just one example of this bylaw says if you're going to use our roads, Mr. Developer or Mrs. Developer, you have to do an inventory of the roads you're dealing with. You have to do a pre-conditioned survey of those roads. And if you mess up our roads, you have to fix them, and in a reasonable amount of time. It also says if you're going to do blasting, that if there are wells within 750 feet, I believe, is that correct? That you have to do water quality assessment and flow rates before you do blasting, and then after blasting, you have to ensure the people that everything is good. So we're trying to protect the assets of the town. We encourage you to vote for this. If there need to be changes, just like any zoning bylaw, those can come in amendments later. So thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. So, thank you for that presentation, both of you. This has been brought before us by a unanimous vote of the select board to put into town meeting. This has been recommended by our finance committee 3-0 with 1 abstention, correct? This has been not recommended by our planning board. It's not recommended by the planning board 5-0, correct? And that's as far as I know. Are there any other bodies that have, town bodies that have voted to recommend or not recommend this? All right, so I think that's what we have by way of information we need for our discussion. So, discussion. This is on the main motion as amended by replacing section 8 on consulting fees as we just did. We have one more here. We've been keeping track, as you know. Hello, Ms. Zorro. I think we're up to 92, so I think we'll need 62 for passage, which would require a 2/3 majority. Discussion. Yes, sir. All right, I'm going to ask people to line up at the microphone. And remember to identify yourself for the record, please. Well, hold. To line up at the microphone. Thank you. Hi. Say your name and where you live.
Ariana Collins, Parasic Road. I just wanted clarification about the baseline and if that you would be gathering information in all seasons, because we know water flow and all sorts of other environmental impacts change over time and through the season. So I just wanted to make sure that a baseline is gathered throughout the whole year.
I don't know if the baseline would be gathered all through the year, but if there was a specific thing like water quality where folks wanted testing it in the spring, the select board, I'm sure, would do its best to arrange for that in conjunction with the planning board. So it would depend on the particular type of testing that was being done. But it wouldn't necessarily go for a 12-month period.
Thank you.
I'm John O'Connor, Plainfield Road. I noticed that one of the provisions in there was for protection of public property. Nothing about private property?
So that was one of the AG's comments on the Shelburne bylaw. And our town council made it very clear that any insurance or other financial surety had to deal with just public property, that private properties have their own recourse, and that if a bylaw tried to address private property, it was stepping beyond what was allowed under state law.
Okay. Yes,
Jody Hall, Smith Road. I'm rising to speak in favor of this bylaw. I want to congratulate the Select Board and the Franklin County Regional Government for putting together such a comprehensive piece of rules and regulations. I'm going to say what I said at the hearing, basically, and that is that, as we all know, we live in a time of very large corporations who use the law, use their lawyers, their huge, vast resources to come into a place like a town like Ashfield and build a pipeline or whatever. We need to have these kinds of regulations in place now. It's a very different world than it was 30 years ago. I know that the planning board, I heard that the planning board would like to fine tune it. I think we need to pass this today and work on changes to the bylaws afterwards. Everybody else can come forward. Take the ball.
Thank you. Ms. Hall says you can all come forward, so thank you. So anyone who wishes to speak, please line up to the microphone just to make sure that we get home for the Kentucky Derby, please.
Brian Clark Road. Since the planning board, it said like the planning board unanimously.
Right.
The planning board is unanimously opposed to this, as I understand it. I'd be interested to hear what their concerns are with this.
Just for clarification, the planning board did not recommend it unanimously. Michael Fitzgerald, Chair of the Planning Board.
Baptist Corner Road. Basically, as Tom said earlier on a different article, we're not ready for it. We are unanimous in believing that it needs a lot more work before we can administer it. If you as the voters vote for a zoning bylaw, you're giving instructions to the planning board that we need to follow. And in the case of this, the instructions are not entirely clear. The purpose section overlaps the main purpose section of the larger zoning bylaws. The definition section is not mixed in with the, need to make this taller for me. The definition section is not mixed in with the definition section of the rest of the bylaw. The applicability section needs more definition and more work. There are more definitions that perhaps need to be developed. The application section seems to be somewhat incomplete, although it's pretty good. The design section has a lot of its parts not in the design section, but elsewhere. And throughout there is references to pre-construction and post-construction activities that we will be required to keep track of, but they're not all grouped together in a way that is easy to how we would do this. So if you vote for this today, the planning board is either going to spend several months writing rules about what we think you mean, or what we think Peg meant, or we're going to start trying to rewrite the bylaw so that it's something that we can be more effective with. And anybody else on the planning board want to add to that? So that's basically where we're at. We're not objecting to the concept. We won't disrespect any of you if you vote for this. We understand the need for something along these lines. But in good conscience, I can't tell you that this is going to protect you from a pipeline. In fact, as Ron said, this is not prescriptive earlier. I disagree. This is a prescriptive bylaw. And that means that if somebody's normal business practices are everything that's in here, they're going to see this as a permission slip to come to Ashfield and develop something large. I have no idea who that is. But 7 or 8 years ago, I had no idea that a pipeline might want to come here. And it could be something else coming along that I don't know about. This is new territory. Our Massachusetts laws say very specifically that we can't regulate utility corridors, not producers, with our zoning bylaws, yet we're attempting to. It reminds me a little bit of, say, the sewage treatment plant. I mean, growing stuff with our effluent was a great idea at the time, and then we found out it didn't work. And nobody's really tried, as far as I know, to regulate utilities on a local level like this. Other towns are trying it. I hope it works for them. I hope if we do it, it works for us. But I can't honestly say this is going to work for us. And I think the rest of the planning board, for various reasons, agrees with. We have uncertainties about how we're going to administer it and whether it will actually work. But thank you for coming today.
Thank you. Every year, it always comes back to our argument somehow. I'm going to call on you, but I'm going to give some citizens a chance. So please make notes of what you'd like to say, and I'll give you the opportunity. Mr. Martin.
So there was a beautiful woman on the other side of the road before me. I think she's ahead of me.
Go first, please.
Before
I think we need your name.
My name is Ben Marcus from Bellis Road. Can I ask a question first, Buzz?
Yes.
If this, there's a lot of buzz that if this is voted down, there is some period of time from whence we won't be able to bring the matter up again. Is that a fact or not a fact?
I can't answer, but would one of you like to answer this? No. All right. My understanding is that if it is, if the planning board doesn't agree to it and it is voted down today, that it can't be brought up again for 2 years unless the planning board later comes in with something that it does agree to. That's my understanding. Is that your understanding, Mr. Kohler? Is that your understanding, Mr. Sloan? Is that your understanding, Mr. Fitzgerald? Then that's yes. So if the planning board had recommended this and you voted down, can't come back for 2 years. In this case, we don't have a recommendation from the planning board that you accept this. So if we vote it down and the planning board comes in again with something related to it, short of 2 years from now, we can then entertain it because the planning board is recommending it for the first time. That's the way I read the statute. Right? Okay. Any disagreement with that? So, that's the answer to that question. Now go on to what you want to do.
So my comment is the same as I said. We had a meeting in this building the weekend of Easter. 100 or so people, by show of hands, said that they were in favor of passing it. And my comment that day was that perfect is the enemy of good. And I don't think this is a perfect bylaw, but it's good. And the folks on the planning commission said, well, it's just going to be a lot of work for us to make it right. And I don't know if that's the duty of obedience or care or loyalty, but as the members of the committees, we should do the town wants. So I rise in favor of passing a good bylaw today.
Thank you. You're just described as a beautiful woman. You should say your name and address.
And your relationship.
I am married to the previous speaker for almost 35 years. My name is Jenny Markins. I live at 597 Dulles Road. We moved here 10 years ago, and in, I think it was 2014, we got a card on the door out of the blue. We knew nothing about pipelines. We knew nothing about the kind of menace that these pose. This was going 50 feet from our bedroom. We would have lived in a 2,000-foot incineration zone. And this was going to run directly under live voltage transmission wires. Pipelines leak at a rate of 8 to 9% on a good day. And for 2 years, I had nightmares every night based on everything I was reading about other communities in New York and Pennsylvania and the hell that people are living in to produce this quantity of gas, but also the bullying and the extreme tactics. They have doctors muzzled in reporting medical conditions. There are children being forced to live in a toxic nightmare and their parents can't afford to move. It requires highly specialized legal assistance to address the kinds of abuses that are being levied on their families. And if we think we're equal under the law, try to find an affordable lawyer for the average person who could take these billionaire behemoths to court. They can string this out for years. They have highly specialized lawyers. When we were looking at defending our property, we were looking at having to import someone from an oil and gas development area. And I, first of all, am extremely grateful that we moved to Ashfield. If we lived anywhere else, I would be very concerned. We made a private decision to consult the town. And we refused to meet with them from go. We didn't allow them to make us offers. We know how they operate. And we were very fortunate that we have activists in this community. I would say to the planning board that there are other planning boards that are also struggling with this. We had no idea the kind of chemical terror and how few rights we or our town would have in the face of this kind of thing. And if it isn't on the books when they show up, you can't reconstruct it later. We couldn't reconstruct any kind of demand for pre-water testing. And their lawyers are pretty good. You know, they can say, well, you know, you have this other thing going on in town, or this showed up this way, and you know, can I afford the kind of expertise to test for benzene continually over a period of years? And this is something that I feel very strongly that we need to begin. 4 years have elapsed. And I'm very pleased to know that I believe, and Peggy, you can answer this, did Caroline Oliphant consult on this?
She didn't consult on this particular bylaw.
Okay, all right. The answer was no as to this particular bylaw.
Okay, but her expertise was in the mix in some way, is my understanding. And she has worked with towns who have tried to protect themselves, and there have been successes. And more we're seeing communities do home rule. There was a community in New Hampshire that has gotten some legislation going. I'm really nattering on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carolyn Brennan, Ashfield Road. Apparently, the objections we have heard are not substantive. The objections can be dealt with. The behemoth is at our gate. This is urgent. We have to act now, or it's too late.
Thank you, Ms. Howell. Oh, shoot. Ms. Howell.
Judy Howell, Spruce Corner Road. I have a question for Peggy. The bylaw that was passed in Shelburne, did that receive changes that were more acceptable to the town or the planning board? And do we have to reinvent our own response?
So the AG's office made some recommendations about about things that they would have liked to see a little differently. They did approve the overall bylaw, and so we took the AG's recommendations of things that they would like to see done differently, and we've incorporated those, and then we ran those by town council. Thank you.
And I just want to add a little addendum to that. The Attorney General doesn't tell you what it's going to approve before it actually has it before. The problem often is the Attorney General has to wait till we act on something before it tells us whether it's lawful or not. So that's a constitutional analysis involving the powers of the Attorney General. It doesn't have advisory powers. However, we can look and see what it's done in similar situations, which is what our town council did in recommending what we should be doing. That's the answer to that question, I think, right?
Yes, and can I just add
Yes.
one more thing? So Ron and I just wanted to make it very clear that the reason why he put up the FERC certificate is that in some instances there is what's known as federal preemption over a town zoning bylaw. And so in those cases, such as the NED pipeline, then the FERC encourages them to look at your local regulations and try and meet those if possible, if feasible. And so part of the idea with creating this bylaw was to establish what the town wanted to see happen, even if there was federal preemption in terms of water testing, in terms of air quality testing, in terms of protection of municipal infrastructure. So this bylaw will be fully enacted if there is no federal preemption. So if there is a large-scale project proposed in Ashfield, that it is required to follow state law, but there are some instances where there's federal preemption, in which case they will look at your local bylaws. For example, all the preliminary reports prepared for the pipeline went through and evaluated individual zoning bylaws to see whether they had noise standards or other standards, because they are supposed to be trying to comply with those. But I just wanted to make that really clear.
Yeah, and I don't want to insult anybody, but it's my job to make sure we know what we're voting on. So one person benefits. We haven't said that FERC is the acronym for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which regulates energy companies.
Okay, just to expand on what Peggy just brought up, was the problem with the last attempt at the NED pipeline, Northeast Direct Pipeline, was that the developers weren't really coming to the town. A little bit with Concom, because they had to follow some thresholds there. But they were going to individuals, and they were working with individuals independently. It wasn't a town-related stuff. So if you saw all of the whereas in the citizen petition, it was, we want a process that gets the town involved. Not just the planning board, but a more public process. Yes, federal preemption is out there. They have the big sword. But we can make this a much bigger, more transparent process if it ever comes across that threshold in the future. And having worked for a lot of pipeline companies in the past, hundreds, I can tell you that one of the first things we did when we were looking for routes and electrical transmission lines and so on and so forth was look at the zoning bylaws. So if you just have a special permit process, then it's very possible they'll just say you're like every other town. You're just like Otis or Sandusfield and so on and so forth, and in we go. So bylaws are very important.
Okay, again, you folks, don't forget about questions if you want to come back to, but I'd really like to hear from citizens, so.
Diane Sibley, Conway Road, Ashfield. Closer to the mic, very close to the mic. Okay, I don't want to repeat what a lot of people have said, but I just want to say briefly that there's so much obvious good in this bylaw. I don't know why we would want to impede it at this point. Waiting 2 years is waiting much too long. Whether we rewrite it or amend it, I thank the planning board for all the work they do, but I don't see a difference between 2 years in terms of rewriting or, well, any time in terms of rewriting or amending. It's the same amount of time, it's just to a different purpose. I think we should put a stake in the ground right now. There's a lot of excess fracked gas that these pipeline companies want to get, not to us, wanted to oversee this and make money on them. And I don't think they should be raping our land to do it. So, thank you, and I hope you'll vote.
Thank you. Ms. Baptiste and then Mr. Curtis.
Molly Baptiste, Miracle Road. I want to also add my thanks for all the work that's gone into this over 4 years and the amount of research that this obviously represents. We really need something like this. I have a two-part question, and the first goes to the planning board. How long do you think it would take you to amend this to the degree in which you would feel comfortable supporting it?
That's part one?
That's part one.
That's part one.
I believe last summer we said it would probably take a year and a half to get this to town meeting. But we actually were presented with a bylaw to do a hearing on in 6 months. It took us a year and a half, I think, to do the telecommunications and work all of that out. I think our basic bylaws took 2 or 3 years of debate and research. This is perhaps more complicated than telecommunications, but a lot of fast-track work has been done, a lot of research has been done by other people, and we really appreciate the fact that a study group with some professionals worked on it all last fall, and that kind of gave us a boost up. But it's not something we can do in a couple meetings, because if that was the case, we would have amended it last month and gotten it ready for this meeting.
So your estimate is, at this point?
We have to debate whether we want to break rules or replacement or do amendments, and we're not really sure. I guess my personal estimate is there may be another version of this in its entirety by next town meeting. But that's just a guess.
Next spring.
Yeah.
Because part two of my question was, is it possible to postpone it to a date certain, to set a deadline for that kind of amendment if we were not to approve it as is right now?
To whom are you asking that?
Maybe you or to...
Well, procedurally, there could be a motion to postpone to a date certain, which is amendable as to the date. It's debatable. It requires a simple majority to pass. I'm not treating your question as a motion at this juncture.
I'm not yet moving it. I'm just raising it as an issue. I think it's a possibility.
So let me just explain to people what we already know. A motion to table is non-debatable and non-amendable, and therefore requires a 2/3 supermajority to vote. Motion to table, we did that earlier today. A motion to postpone indefinitely or to a date certain is debatable and is amendable as to a date or no date, and requires a simple majority to pass. So that's just the procedural answer to your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baptiste. Mr. Curtis.
Peter Curtis, Murray Road. A couple of things here. Here's one we know, and that is that it's taken 4 years since we the people pretty much demanded that we do something about the fact that we're very vulnerable. And that's 4 years, and now we're sitting here and we have something, and the other thing that's not debatable is that it's not perfect, number one, but number two, that we can amend it, and we can begin that process right away. And in the meantime, we have some teeth. Otherwise, we don't have any teeth. There's another thing I'd like to point out, and that is that we have an environment here. We have a president who would love to see us vulnerable. We have a governor of the state who's speaking out of both sides of his mouth. He sweetly tells us how green he is, but then everything he does is contrary to that. We're not going to have any support with the governor of Massachusetts. We need to support ourselves. And my suggestion is that we pass this today, and then we put the feet to the fire to get this amended in any way that we feel as a town that we need to amend it, and do it promptly. not wait another 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. Mr. Elba.
Will Howell, Baptist Corner Road. The only shortcoming I can see of this bylaw is that I didn't see any instrument there to actually support the need for the time and energy that will have to be put into any management or monitoring of the situation, adding administrative work to the town, which I think should be part of the bylaw. We can just add that later, that's fine. But I think we need to get this bylaw in there and then deal with any imperfections we have. One thing that has not been mentioned is you've heard of the open season that these, the NED pipeline, the Northeast Energy Direct Pipeline, established an open season when it decided to table the project going through Ashfield. The open season means that they can come back at any time and just pull that project off the shelf and throw it on FERC's desk and say, we decided we want to go through with this. So I believe, I'm not sure about this, but I believe that that open season is still active. And if not, they actually have an opportunity to renew that open season. So we are still in peril. And we have, as a town, realized the threat of a pipeline going through our town, environmentally and in many other ways. If any of you got down to the Otis State Forest and saw the destruction, abuse of nature, and the abuse of people by the state police and by the energy officials, that would make you think twice about ever having a pipeline coming through your property or through your town. The other thing is that, as I've understood it, this bylaw does not only refer to pipelines, it refers to other types of large industrial projects. And as the planning board said today, they don't know what's down the road. We don't know what's down the road. We don't know what's coming. So we need something in place to protect our town.
Can I address his question?
Or can you make a note to yourself so we can hear from other people? I'm not sure if there really was a question. Was there?
Oh, it was a question of funding.
I apologize. Yes, please do.
Well, this is really important. A project coming through our town is devastating in the way you look at it. I don't know if you recall, but up on the bullets up there, the orange bullets or tan bullets, one of them was $5,000 that we set aside for the pipeline mitigation fund. You guys voted on it. You actually voted 15, but we, as an act of solidarity, assisted in a general pool of legal support where Montague's, a number of towns were involved with the fight. And we contributed to that fight. You, the taxpayer, contributed to that fight. Now, the Section 8 that was amended here is a very powerful section. What it allows us to do is hire consultants as peer reviews. So they say, oh, this isn't going to affect your water quality, for example. We can hire our own hydrologists, charge the developer for the cost of it. Now, does that mean there won't be an administrative fee somewhere for the town to manage this and for the time and expense of all the folks? No. But we would be facing that anyways as we are involved with any project. But we have to consider that, and that's what that Section 8 does, is it really softens the blow by allowing us to hire consultants at their expense.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Mr. Bateman.
William Spademan, Buckland Road. It sounds like almost everybody agrees that this would be a really good thing, and that it's not perfect. But I'm confused about the planning board's position. It sounds like the planning board would have liked to have had an opportunity to make it better before we considered it. But it also sounds like even after, if we voted on it today, the planning board would be able to fix it and it would be just as good later as they would have liked it to have been today. And it also sounds like everybody agrees that this would give us some protection if Kinder Morgan came back, say, tomorrow. So I'm confused because it doesn't seem to make any sense at all for us not to pass this for the planning board's reason. If it can be fixed just as well afterwards as before passing something. Am I missing something? Does the planning board agree that we would be better off tomorrow if an undesirable project came through? And that we could just as well fix things afterwards as before passing something?
Mr. Fitzgerald, would you like to address that?
Sure.
The truth is, we simply don't know. This is a prescriptive bylaw. It essentially says that if you're a large-scale developer and you can follow these rules, you're welcome here, on the one hand. On the other hand, if you're a large-scale developer and you're reading the zoning bylaws, you look at these and you say, that looks like a lot of expense and it's very confusing. We're going to have to spend like 30% more on our design and development costs if we come here. And we don't know what's down the road. So the planning board's recommendation is not expecting, actually I'm sure we all expect this to pass today. It's just we don't really want anybody to say to us, but you told us it was all right. Because we know it's not necessarily all right. Because it is a prescriptive bylaw, and it's essentially saying this is what large-scale developers need to do to be here. At $4 a gallon, the pipeline people will come back here and they'll look at this and they'll say, wow, that looks expensive. And I'm just making up the number, $4 a gallon. I don't have a crystal ball, I don't know. But at $5 or $6 a gallon, with all of Western Mass having various prescriptive bylaws or something on the books, they may look at this and see a provision slip. I don't know. And so I think basically as a planning board, understanding the planning law, we all are very shy about telling you that this is necessarily a good idea, because whereas short-term, under the last circumstances we saw, I believe this would certainly have given them pause. It might not have slowed them down very much, but long-term, as a planner, I've been here 20-some years, and I didn't even think about cell towers when I joined, and now I've been thinking about cell towers for most of those 20-some years. I don't know what's around the corner. So please vote your conscience on this, I guess is what I'm saying. But don't feel like we're telling you this is a great idea, because we simply don't know.
Mr. Fitzgerald, before you go, again, I don't want to insult anybody. There might be one, before you go, there might be one person that doesn't know the difference between a proscriptive and a prescriptive bylaw or law. Could you please tell us what we mean by a prescriptive bylaw versus a proscriptive bylaw?
Prescriptives is something like no nuclear waste facilities are allowed in town. I think we actually have a sentence like that.
Ban it is to proscribe it.
Right, and a prescriptive is saying if you do sound tests, and if you test the wells, and if you give us 7 pages of this plan, 7 pages of that plan, and you go through all of those steps, then you're allowed to do this. And this is a prescriptive bylaw in that it spells out how to develop large scale in Ashfield. And it does it in a very expensive way, and in a way that would be difficult for the town to administer, and hopefully it'll just chase the big people away, because a lot of subdivision bylaws are prescriptive in Western Massachusetts, but they're actually proscriptive in actual practice because they require incredibly expensive roads with granite curbs and 10-foot tall trees if you're going to do a subdivision. That's a prescriptive, it's actually a proscriptive. This bylaw, in my opinion, I haven't asked the planning board about this, is doing a similar thing. It's trying to raise the bar of expenses so high that they'll never bother us.
Thank you for that. I think Ms. Stone would like to add to that.
I just wanted to clarify that this is still a special permit process. So if the zoning bylaws apply, the planning board has the ability to approve the application with conditions or deny the special permit. So I view this as a supplement to. Subdivision regulations are designed to govern how a road is constructed, how stormwater infrastructure is put in. So it is very detailed. If you follow it and you have a vibrant use such as a single-family home going into the residential subdivision, then the town is supposed to approve it if it's met the requirements of those subdivision regulations. So I view this a little differently because it's a special permit process.
Thank you. Ms. Kohler.
Nina Kohler, 168 Bailey Road. We've been told we cannot ban the pipeline. So how else do you fight it? Why did Ned decide not to continue? Gas prices fell, but they've met a lot of resistance. We had hundreds of conservation restrictions, which we were going to fight for every last one. Obviously, the state didn't stand up for those because they allowed Otis to happen, which was a state forest, the most expensively paid for state forest anywhere. And the only way to fight something like this is to show them what you will go to, what lengths you will go to stop them. And if this is a tool we have in our toolkit, why would we not use it?
Thank you. Sir.
Hi. I'm Bill Scaife, Smith Road. I'd like to ask Ms. a couple of questions, clarification questions. Would a pipeline, as the pipeline was proposed, fall under this bylaw, or is it under FERC as part of the Interstate Commerce Clause of the Constitution? It's my understanding it's regulated by the federal government, and you can't have, if there's an interstate, and the reason that law, that clause is in the Constitution is so that you don't have a law in one state that varies significantly from the law in the neighboring state and impedes business development. And sort of as part B of that question, utility companies are under the, if I understand things correctly, are under the oversight of federal agencies and commissions, and their rules and regulations would be applied and override what we have here, although this might be given great consideration.
So you are correct, in interstate pipelines, there is federal preemption, so they can override your local zoning bylaws. But it was very clear from the FERC certificate that was put up by Ron that they asked the applicant to try, to the extent they can, to comply with the local regulations. And so will this absolutely protect Ashfield if there is federal preemption? The FERC is going to decide that, the Federal Energy Regulatory Committee. But having a bylaw that you can say, these are the conditions that we want. They often attach conditions to their certificate. And so having information about what's important to the town and what are the concerns of the town might be very helpful, particularly if the planning board, is a different planning board in 5 or 10 years and something comes back. They may not be aware of all the different aspects or impacts of a pipeline. And so a lot of research went into this bylaw, looking at what other states were doing, and so this was sort of the best thinking of the areas that you should be concerned about, and hopefully would provide some guidance to not only the planning board, but the Board of Health and the Select Board. And so, yes, in those instances where there is federal preemption, yes, they do override your local zoning bylaw. But they are also required to look at it.
Right. And how about individual utility plants?
It really depends on the circumstances. So if the utility plant is subject to state regulations and there isn't federal preemption, then presumably this bylaw will be kicking in if there was a mandatory submission under MEPA. So large scale.
Okay, but the state would have preemption.
The state has their own laws, but if there isn't federal preemption, then the town zoning bylaw should apply, unless something changes.
Okay. One other quick question. You have discussed with, this has been bylaws like this, and I gather our bylaw has been discussed by the Attorney General's office, State Attorney General's office. Did anybody in the office find it confusing or difficult to administer as written?
Well, Shelburne has passed it, but they haven't had to use it yet.
But it was reviewed by
But it was reviewed by the
Board
AG's
of
office with respect to, does it meet the legal requirements of state law? So.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lawrence. Ms. Link, I'm going to allow people who haven't spoken first to speak, and then only people who have a second shot.
Mary Link, Buckland Road. I'm one of the people who spent a lot of last summer out in Sandusfield, watching day by day and getting arrested to try to stop a pipeline out there that just totally raped our state forest, and got to see firsthand what that looks like. And it's not something, I didn't want it before when Ned came, and now feel even stronger. And I also watched the people in Sandusfield where their little teeny town had almost no protection. And the pipeline company promised to fix their roads. You heard Ron say earlier, the roads are a mess. They sort of said, oh, well, we're not going to do that now. They didn't have any bylaw like this to protect them that way. And I think that, one's hope, and as Michael pointed out, the hope is that something like this works as a deterrent, but even if it didn't work as a deterrent, even if a pipeline company came in, it would help protect us much more than places where the pipeline company has come in and they didn't have those protections. So it's a step in the right direction, and starting from square one, where when Ned came here, started picking people off individually. Jenny talked about them showing up at their door, and they didn't know anything about it before that. Part of this bylaw requires any company to go to the town first, so that we would get to know publicly that this was happening before any of us individually started getting picked off quietly, secretly. So the protection begins there, and then it talks about testing of wells and doing that before and during and after at the company's expense. All of these are really important things, even if a pipeline ultimately did get approved, which we would hope it would. So I think it's a really valuable thing to have. We've waited 4 years. I want to see us approve this now and get some kind of protection, and do what we can to be supportive of our wonderful planning board as they tweak it and work it through amendments or whichever way they go to strengthen it. But I hope we'll improve it now.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Mr. Gray.
Lyle Gray, Apple Valley Road.
I want to ask a clarification for one of the definitions, section 2.0. The term is special permit with certificate granting authority. The planning board shall be responsible for granting a special permit and issuing a certificate of compliance to construct and/or operate an LS, ICF, and/or ASDF if it determines that such facility is in compliance with this bylaw. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I assume that when it says shall be responsible means they make the final decision, not they shall grant it. I think clarifying that speaks to whether or not this is proscriptive or prescriptive.
To answer that?
Point of order. We're discussing an amendment on section 8.
We passed the amendment. That's okay. So who would like to address section 2? Sloan?
So, it's intended to state that special permit granting authority is the planning board. So I understand that you'd probably like to see it say shall be responsible for granting, I guess, or denying a special permit, just to make it perfectly clear. But town council reviewed this, and the special permit process allows it to be approved with conditions, or denied. So.
Okay, Ms. Gray. Thank you. Who's next? Ms. Murray is next.
Caroline Murray, Strowhanger Road. I'd like to call the question.
Is there a second? Yes. Mr. Precourt? Mr. Precourt. Seconded. This is, I'm sorry, Mr. Go ahead, hang in there. See what happens. This is non-debatable, non-amendable. This is to cut off debate. It will require a 2/3 majority. I lost count at 95. You have 96. So we'll see by voice vote if we can declare and all agree whether or not we achieve 2/3. All those in favor of cutting off, calling the question, meaning cutting off debate, and voting on the main motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. I only heard a handful of no's. I think it passed by 2/3. Does anybody? I'm sorry. And an abstention. Any other abstentions? There's 1, 2, 3. Oh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 abstentions. So we have to count to ensure that we got 2/3. So our tellers, Mrs. Murray, the question caller. Ms. Hobb, Kohler, and I think we have the jury. Okay, so can we swear in a fourth teller quickly? Yes, Ms. Schwartz, thank you. Raise your right hand and talk to her. Thank you. So we need 2 on this side. Mr. Monahan, Mr. Meyer, please just join us so there's no ambiguity. Anybody who's a registered voter. Okay, order. Okay, here are counting. All those in favor of cutting off debate, calling the question, please raise your hand and keep it up until we have the opportunity to count. opposed to cutting off debate, please raise your hand and keep it up. Right. All those, you may put your hands down. Thank you. All those who abstain, please raise your hand and keep it up. Abstention. That second side. You get over that side. Abstention. Thank you. You may put your hands down. You may put your hands down. Thank you very much for your patience. Okay, so the total was 98 voters, right?
78 said yes.
No, 98 voters. We needed 65 to say yes. 78 said yes. So the motion to cut off debate and vote on the main motion carries. So you're now voting on the main motion as amended, Mr. Chadwick, with the Section 8 amendment that we have. And we need 2/3 for this, so if our tellers can remain poised to jump into action. Nancy, you're on that side. Okay, all those in favor, everybody know what we're doing? We're voting on the main motion. All those in favor of Article 32 as amended by changing Section 8, please raise your hand and keep it up. This is if you're in favor, and our tellers will count your hands.
Hands up then on this side, please. Put it down on this side.
This, only this side can move it down. This side, still visible. This. Okay, so one more vote and we're there, which is we need to vote, we need to count the abstentions because we need 2/3 of all votes. Let me do the note. All right, yeah, I got the P's. I want to get back home. All those opposed to Article 32, the ones who don't want to see this pass, please raise your hand. Keep them up while they're counting. All those, yeah. All those opposed.
Please keep your hands up while you count.
Will you report the findings, please? Will you report the count?
Opposed, abstentions?
That was the nays, right? Okay. All those who are abstaining, please raise your hand and keep it up while we count it. Hands can go down. Hands can go down. Well, I never graduated from the Blue Jay group in second grade arithmetic, but even I can tell you that that was 2/3. So, Article 32 passes with the amendment of Section 8. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Long. Article 33, Stonewall Drive. I understand Ms. Shapiro is making a motion, but I don't see her. I now see her. Thank you. All right, let's keep order for another few minutes. Thank you. Yes, Article 33, do I hear a motion?
My name is Amy Shapiro, I live on Stonewall Drive. I move that the town vote to instruct the select board to lay out the private way currently known as Stonewall Drive as referenced in the annual town meeting warrant and move forward the process to create it as a public way.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Who? By who? By Phil Bless. Thank you. So, would you like to speak to this? Give us a little information about why we're considering perhaps considering this motion. I really need a little more quiet in the house. Thank you.
Stonewall Drive was created many years back, and the ownership of that road has always been in question, and there are property owners on the road who have always had difficulty purchasing the property and potentially selling the property because of the issues with the ownership of the road. So we'd really like to have clarity on that, first of all. And also, the residents have been maintaining that road for many years with the understanding that it's a public road maintained privately. The planning board did come before the planning board many years ago, and it was accepted as a right-of-way road. Subdivision.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I was finished with the word component. I understand there is no recommendation from the finance committee.
That is correct. No recommendation by vote 5-0.
Thank you very much. So, discussion. Yeah, Ms. Quigley.
Very quickly here, Road. I had an opportunity to ask Tom what he thought of how the road is engineered and what kind of costs would be incurred to the town by adding this. And his answer was that he didn't have, or he thought he'd try and get over in the next 24 hours before town meeting. And I said, that's not much time to inspect all the culverts and see about the engineering, to do an estimate of what it's going to cost us. And I feel like it's like taking a vote to vote on something that I don't know what it's going to cost. So I move to postpone this question until another meeting when we know what's up. Because I think there's implications here that I'd like to know.
Yeah, generally speaking, a motion to postpone should come before you speak. And that's okay. I mean, so Ms. Quigley thinks there should be a motion to postpone in order to do more investigatory work, but we don't have that motion before us now. Anybody else wish to speak? Mr. Poisson?
I just came up and said, we need to answer the question.
Mr. Poisson is here in case we need any questions answered. Mr. What are people saying?
I will speak, I will ask the question.
You will? You can tell us Article 33, right?
My understanding, the way Amy read that motion, is that she's asking to look into laying out as a town public way, laying out a right of way. So I think, back to the other question about if I took a look at the road, I did take a look the other day, and I actually met Amy on the road, and we talked about the way she wanted to go forward with this, which I think is a better way than originally just asking us to vote on accepting it as a town way. This kind of provides a process in which we can move forward and evaluate the road, verify the measurements that are on the plan that we have, and see if it fits realistically with what physically we need to go there for things such as turnarounds and that type of thing. And I think it would provide me with a little better understanding if that's what the board wants to move forward with me spending my time that you all pay for evaluating a private road. I did not want to spend a lot of time on a private road, number one, tromping around people's private property, number two, spending your time, my time that you pay for, on a private road. So I think doing this as a process is the proper way to do it, and if that's what the town decides that they want to do, then I can move forward and we can verify the information and see exactly what needs to be done, and then that'll be the proper time to talk about costs and things like that nature.
Thank you. If you would stay here. Mr. Fitzgerald was next.
That's already answered my question.
Mr. Fitzgerald, wait. Mr. Pless.
I've been involved in various ways with Stonewall Drive over the years. The planning board accepted it as a subdivision in the early 80s. Our subdivision bylaws have changed dramatically. Two of the biggest issues with this road, one is there's no maintenance agreement among the property owners. It was not required back then. It is required now. So what's the problem with that? You know, they're neighbors. They should be able to get along. So it hasn't worked out. But more importantly, when somebody goes to sell their property, a bank will not give a mortgage without a maintenance agreement. And the neighbors cannot agree on a maintenance agreement. So the town allowed this to be created, but now it's an untenable situation. So this is one remedy. The other issue is these people on this road are all paying top dollar for taxes. They are not getting any discount on the fact that it's a private road that they have to maintain. So they're paying full taxes like the rest of us who get plowed, who get repairs. So the bylaw the motion is an attempt to have the select board and the town highway department look into curing this issue and get the answers to cost and feasibility. So I encourage you to vote for this article.
Thank you, Mr. Pless.
Kohler Bailey Road. I just want to know, how do we keep this from happening again? I mean, if some developer, Michael, are we protected now with our special permits if a developer just wants to plow a road through a field and put up a couple houses and then later on expect that we're going to adopt that road? How do we prevent this from happening? This sounds like setting a precedent, even though I feel deeply for the people that live on that road.
Thank you. Ms. Baptiste.
Molly Baptiste, River Road. I see that Amy has the wording printed out, and it's it's different than what we have in the warrant. Is it something that we can hear again more clearly before we vote on it?
Every time you hear a motion made, Ms. Davies?
It is.
Ms. Davies, do you still want to hear it again?
I guess I didn't have the most recent warrant.
I think everybody knows that what gets posted gets turned into a motion, and often, as long as it's within the scope of what was posted, will be different than what we saw posted, because what's posted is always to see how the town feels about, right? To see if the town wishes to. But the motion is always, I move that the town do, and sometimes it's going to differ what we're asking for. So the language will be different. So one more time, Ms. Davies, you want us to reread it? You want your order to reread it?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, will you reread your motion, please?
Okay. I'll try to do that. So I move that the town vote to instruct the select board to lay out the private way currently known as Stonewall Drive as referenced in the annual town meeting warrant and move forward the process to create it as a public way. We're basically asking to explore the process and just take it forward, and that if it continues down the path, that it would come to a town meeting for a vote down the road.
Thank you. Mr. Carter, then Ms. Dole.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The original, when the warrant was published, the original thought was to come forward and ask town meeting to accept the road. After some discussions, certainly with Amy and other members on the road that she spoke to, there's all these hurdles, just like anything that has to do with about anything, that there has to be all these hurdles. And so the question now is just to ask us to look at it, to try to lay out the road, figure out what it would be, if it would meet the standards. I know Ron has brought up at a couple of our select board meetings that there are standards that especially dead-end roads have to meet. And we have to check into those. To think that any of us have them committed to memory would be just a little bit too much. So we have all these hurdles, and actually laying out the road, if we get to the point where everyone would agree that it should be a town road, there would have to come a time when the town would have to take that by eminent domain, right? Whoever actually owns that property right now isn't going to own it anymore. So I see a lot of hurdles like that. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be particularly fast, but something that can at least start the discussion, probably not cost too much of the highway superintendent's time, and hopefully before we get too far down the line, we shouldn't have to spend a lot of money on engineers, I would hope. But I do think it's a process to take a look at it and to find out if it is in the condition that would be acceptable for the town to take it, or would those property owners have to improve that road. Those are all questions that we'd have to explore and go through over time. I don't have a timeline on it, but I think this motion, the way it is, I would support that to at least take a look at it. In my own mind, there will come a time when that will be a town road, and I just believe that's the fact of the matter, that it's been resisted for a long time. Probably the way it's laid out now certainly would not be acceptable today, and it's up to town meeting to decide that, but asking the select board to go through and look at all these hurdles and come up with answers, I do not feel is out of the realm of just being respectable neighbors.
Thank you. Ms. Dole?
Lynn Dole, Conway Road. I'm curious how many other roads within Ashfield might fall into this category.
Mr. Fitzgerald? Is that in response to Ms. Dole?
As far as I know, this is
the only unaccepted subdivision in town, and it's been kind of a weird thing in all of my memory.
Is everybody here? As far as Mr. Fitzgerald knows, this is the only unaccepted subdivision in town, and it's kind of a weird thing. That's what he said. And if I can speak further, I was about to say, you do use the microphone.
So if anybody knows the answer to this, this was passed as a subdivision when I was a kid. Under those subdivision laws, and we now have new subdivision regulations that are much different, that it probably doesn't meet as well, and I'm addressing this to Tom and Tom, as town road standards. So as this is grandfathered as a subdivision from the 70s, but the town's being asked to accept it. See, the normal thing is you make a subdivision and the town wants the road because they get state aid or that kind of thing because they have more roads to take care of, and it's a really good road, so you make the subdivider build the road really well, so it's a good deal for you for 20 years. But that's not what happened in Ashfield. The subdivision got built and we didn't want any more of them, so we kept voting down accepting them. And we didn't get any more. It's really the only formal subdivision we have. So I just wanted to say that this is, I'm glad you're taking the slow approach, is I guess what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kohler. I hope I didn't miss any hands.
Yeah, the motion is a little confusing to me. When in my engineering brain on it, when someone says, I move the town vote to instruct the select board to lay out the private way, that is engineering. So what you're telling is plan and profile, survey work probably to confirm what's out there and how it's changed. So I would encourage, and I'm not here to override what's going on here, but I would encourage it to say something like, I move that the town vote to instruct the select board to review the possibility of laying out Stonewall Drive and end it there, because there are going to be costs associated with all of those items to lay it out. From an engineering point of view, to lay out the private way currently known as Stonewall Drive has engineering implications as referenced at the end of town meeting, and move forward the process to create it as a public way. So if you're going to move forward the process to create it as a public way, now you get legal involved with acquisition and stuff like that. So I think what I'm hearing in the general group here is we're kind to the consideration of studying what it might entail, but this doesn't read that way. So I'll listen to what Tom has to say, but I'm inclined to offer a motion.
Well, I'd like to hear Todd, but before you offer the motion, I just want to be clear. Town council drafted this language.
That motion was drafted by town council.
This is drafted by town council. This is a recommendation of what the motion should read like. I think it's consistent with what Mr. Kohler just said, but this is the talking points that town council offered. Number one, this article is non-binding. Number two, the select board is charged statutorily to lay out all public ways, which has not occurred here today. Number three, layout process includes, and Mr. Carter's book was very people speak, but I will read to you what town council said. Appraisal and survey of the road. Planning board sign off on survey as A&R. Notice of layout sent to abutters. Layout order filed by select board. Town meeting must vote to accept. Orders of taking completed after town meeting acceptance. Orders of taking filed at the registry of deeds. Consent of taking signed by abutting property owners. And then finally, costs associated with the layout process have not been estimated nor budgeted in fiscal year 19. So that's what she asked that you be told. You were told that kind of piecemeal, but if Mr. Kohler still wants to make a motion to amend.
No, I don't.
No, he doesn't. So that's why she chose this language, because implicit in the language are your concerns and Mr. Carter's explanation. Mr. Olanek.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So, in considering this sort of anecdotally, hearing what people have said around town, there are two sides to this, right? There's one side that says this would be nice, a nice gesture of our townspeople to accept the folks who are on this private road and have it become a public road that the town owns and maintains. It's a good neighborly thing to do. On the other side, I've heard people say, well, these folks knew they were buying property on a private road. They did it intentionally. It's their responsibility to maintain. The town already has enough of a hard time maintaining its own gravel roads without adding more to them. So I think that's kind of what's before us to vote on. You know, this is all our choice to decide whether we want to take on another this road and make it a town road or not. I think it's that simple. If we vote to move forward on this, we're just spending money to find out what it's going to cost. Sure, you'd have a chance to vote on it later on to decide whether to accept it as a town road or not. But I think we can do that right now. It's sort of a resolution saying, you know, if you're going to vote one way or another, what you want us to do about it.
Thank you, Mrs. Martin's beautiful husband, Ben.
About Bellis Road. So I'm just a simple guy. I read these, it says to see if the town will vote to accept Stonewall Drive. Oh, right. So what is printed in the warrant, so that's, you handed it out this morning, so I apologize.
All right, this is what we call a teachable moment again. So, what's posted in the warrant gives you an idea of the scope, what we're going to talk about and the scope we're going to talk about it. Every article then gets turned into a motion and quite often altered or amended to because of considerations that may have happened since the warrant was posted, or in this case because of what town council recommended. So, Mrs. Shapiro twice read, I move that the town vote to instruct the select board to lay out the private way. It's different language than what you had in the posted warrant. This is the actual motion asking for what?
So you see I'm just pretty, not smart.
You're just a That's Jen Markin's trophy husband, okay. This is great.
Point of information on Mr. Murphy's thing. The amended version, not the amended version of the motion, but the explanation is on page 59 of the handout, with all of the explanatory notes from the council.
Thank you, that's very useful, Mr. Griffin. Okay, are we, whoops, Ms. Shapiro.
I just want to just say that the road is about a quarter of a mile. It's not a very long road. Just as a point of information.
That is good information. Thank you. It's about a quarter of a mile, she wanted to say. Any further discussion on Article 33? One more.
Franklin Wickland, Williamsburg Road. One of the things I'm not hearing is what do we lose in taxes if those houses are not saleable? Because the people that are in them are going to pass on or have to move on. And then the houses are not viable and you're not going to collect taxes. So cost of maintaining the road has got to include what you lose.
Thank you. Any further discussion on Article 33? Are we ready to vote? Yes, we are. All those in favor of the motion to instruct the select board to lay out the private way, and all that layout entails, that's currently known as Stonewall Drive, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Abstentions? We have a number of abstentions. I would rule that the motion carries since it requires only a simple majority. Does anybody disagree with my ruling? Okay, before we adjourn, that is the last of the articles. Hang on, please, if you would. Every year, I think every year I'm even more astonished at the fluidity with all the work that goes behind this by our volunteer boards. You get a small stipend. This front table right here is remarkable. The select board, the planning board, the employees that we have that do this incredible work. It's just so impressive to me. But every once in a while, all the volunteers, all of a couple hundred volunteers who make this town so wonderful, makes the community so Some people actually deserve special recognition. I'd just like to ask the chair of the Finance Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I would just like, even in his absence, to acknowledge all the fine work that David Newell has done for this town in terms of taking care of what for a long time I think we had neglected on the Finance Committee, certainly, and that is the matters having to do with our vocational education programs. He has done a marvelous job over these last several years of keeping track of this, investigating things, organizing this advisory committee among the 4 towns, and doing just an enormous amount of work, analyzing, tracking, keeping tabs on things, coming up with creative solutions and so on. So I think we owe him a great debt of gratitude. I also would like to acknowledge and honor the wonderful service that Mary has given here on our Finance Committee has contributed over many years. She's not only been a wonderfully loyal and diligent member of our Finance Committee, but as you all know, she formerly was the executive assistant to the Select Board and did an enormous amount of work helping this town. And she is knowledgeable, she's very research-oriented, she keeps fantastic notes, more here on this warrant than I think any of us have ever written before. And she is absolutely caring for this community, and I just want to acknowledge that and thank her for her great service. Thank you.
As many of you are aware, Ron Bowler is only going to be a select board member until midnight. So we still have him for a little while, but I'd like to take the opportunity I'm afraid I'm not as eloquent as Ted. I talk about the conductor P's, that's about the extent of my repertoire, but Ron, his dedication to the board in this town has been incredible. Many of you know his activities outside of the board, working for the town, getting arrested, things like that, things that I can't do. Envious of that. But his attention to detail is going to be missed. During meetings, if we wanted to know what happened 4 years ago on June whatever, we look at Ron and he'd pull out a binder about that big and he'd be able to tell us. Because that's just the way his mind works, and it's going to be sorely missed on the board. And I just want to extend my sincere gratitude to you for your service, and thank you very much.
You guys are just so great, and all the wonderful volunteers and all the wonderful people. The really nice thing about sitting at this table is looking at all your faces, and it's family. So thank you for the 6 years. It's been a rewarding experience, and thanks to all of our boards who work together really hard. And I appreciate it. It's been a wonderful learning experience for me.
Thank you. A couple more things. Yes. Thank you. If you haven't voted downstairs, please go down. The polls are open, and make sure that you vote. I want to thank Mr. Taylor, everyone downstairs who came here who make this happen by just checking us in and checking us out, and all the hard, patient work that happens at the poll. So much work by Casey and by Bridget. It's a tremendous team.
One more thing, if you'll indulge me.
Please.
If you all paid attention to one small line item in the budget this year, it was a $150 stipend for the town moderator. I think that's probably the best $150 we could ever spend. Thank you very much.
Go buy some pea seeds right now. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Motion! All in favor? Aye. You're the best. Thank you.